All right, music fans, buckle up. We're going deep on the hottest sounds of 2024. Those albums critics are calling the year's best.
Yeah, we're talking varieties, music critics, and their top picks. And let me tell you something, there's a really cool trend going on here.
Lay it on us. What's got you so hyped?
Well, you'll notice in the reviews we've got here, every single critic chose an album by a woman or a female-fronted group for their #1 spot.
That's right, the ladies are dominating the music scene this year.
And it's not just a coincidence either. This power move is reflected in the 2025 Grammy nominations, too.
It's clear women are shaping the sound of music right now, from global icons like Beyoncé to rising stars.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of stars, Charli XCX, her name is popping up everywhere in these reviews.
She's definitely having a moment, Brad. Her latest is being hailed as a total game changer. One critic even called it a lurid green sonic landscape.
It's wild. Brat is this amazing mix of pop and experimental electronic sounds and the lyrics. Deeply personal, but still playful. It's like Charli XCX at her most confident and daring.
And she didn't stop there. She followed Brat with a remix album, too.
Oh, yeah, Brat, and completely different, but also still Brat.
Exactly. Talk about a mouthful.
Ah.
But the concept is brilliant. She flipped the original album on its head, brought in collaborators like Lord Ariana Grande and Billie Eilish.
It's a whole new vibe, but it stays true to the spirit of Brat. It really shows how versatile she is, and that willingness to push boundaries. That's what makes Charli XCX so exciting. She's not just about radio hits. She's experimenting, evolving, and challenging expectations.
Speaking of pushing boundaries, we got to talk about Kendrick Lamar. He's another artist who's always ahead of the game.
Totally. He's featured on 3 of the 4 critics' lists, and it's not just for his album GNX either.
Right. Jem Aswad mentioned that Lamar dropped a whopping 18 tracks this year, including that epic rap battle with Drake, which pretty much broke the internet.
Yeah, but GNX is what really cemented his place at the top. It's interesting, though, because it's still super lyrically dense and thought-provoking, like all his work, but there's also this accessible, almost pop-infused sound to it.
That accessibility probably comes to the production team he worked with, like Jack Antonoff. That was a surprise.
Right. Antonoff's known for creating those lush, layered soundscapes. He's worked with Taylor Swift and Lorde, so that explains the sonic depth of GNX.
And instead of packing the album with big names, Lamar chose to feature up-and-coming rappers. It shows his commitment to supporting the next generation of hip-hop talent.
He's always looking ahead, and that's what makes him such a force. So we've got experimental pop from Charli XCX, genre-bending hip-hop from Kendrick Lamar. Where do we go from here?
Well, how about the queen of pop herself, Taylor Swift? You can't talk about the best albums of the year without mentioning her record-breaking The Tortured Poets Department, the anthology.
Oh man, 31 tracks, that's a commitment even for Taylor. But the question is the biggest thing also the best?
Right. It's easy to get lost in the sheer size of it, but what are the critics saying?
They're loving it. The Tortured Poets Department blends those electronic influences from Lover and Midnights with the more stripped-down vibes of Folklore and Evermore. It's a massive album, but each song is carefully crafted. It shows how much she's grown as a songwriter.
And let's be real. It wouldn't be a Taylor Swift album without those heartbreak anthems.
Mm.
And this one. It delivers on that front big time.
Oh, for sure. There's some real tearjerkers on there. Packed with those sharp, insightful lyrics Swift is known for. She's not just singing about heartbreak. She's dissecting it, analyzing it, and offering these incredibly relatable takes on love loss and everything in between.
So we've got pop, we've got hip-hop, and now things get really interesting. Beyoncé's Cowboy Carter has sparked a serious debate about genre. Is it country? Is it something else entirely?
Right. Some critics are even comparing it to the Beatles' White Album for its genre-bending style. What's fascinating is how Beyoncé uses Cowboy Carter to highlight the contributions of Black artists to country music, a history that's often overlooked.
It's not just a stylistic choice, it's a statement. And of course, it wouldn't be a Beyoncé album without some surprises. You really got to listen closely to catch all the nuances and layers.
Exactly. It's an album that rewards active listening. Every time you hear it, you might discover something new, a hidden melody, a lyrical twist. It's a journey you gotta take. All right, we're back and ready to keep this musical journey rolling. In part 1, we explored the sonic worlds of pop giants like Charli XCX and Beyoncé. Now we're going to shift gears a bit and dive into some introspective singer-songwriters, genre-bending experimentation, and maybe even a touch of nostalgia.
Ooh, nostalgia. Count me in. So who's first up on our playlist?
Let's start with Jessica Pratt. Her album Here in the Pitch really grabbed the critics' attention with its blend of folk and psychedelic elements.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the overall vibe?
It's got this haunting, almost ethereal quality that's both nostalgic and fresh at the same time. One critic even described it as having a Laurel Canyon feel like something you'd hear drifting out of a cabin in the woods back in the 70s.
Laurel Canyon, huh? That's interesting because we saw a similar nod to the past with Beyoncé's Cowboy Carter. It seems like a lot of artists are drawing inspiration from earlier eras while still creating something new and original.
Totally. It just goes to show that music is cyclical. Artists are always building upon what came before, reinterpreting and reimagining sounds to create something entirely new. And speaking of reimagining sounds, let's talk about Sabrina Carpenter.
Oh, yeah. Sabrina Carpenter, I know her. She had that massive hit Espresso this year.
Right, that's the one. That song was everywhere. But her album Short and Sweet is so much more than just catchy pop hooks. It's this really clever blend of 80s R&B pop and even some folky elements.
I'm loving the 80s vibes coming back.
Yeah.
But what about her lyrics? What's she singing about?
Her lyrics are witty, relatable, and often self-deprecating, which I think is something a lot of young people can connect with.
Yeah, for sure. It's refreshing to see an artist who's not afraid to be vulnerable and show their true self through their music, especially in today's world where everyone's trying to present this perfect image online.
Totally agree. There's something really authentic about an artist who's willing to be honest and open about their flaws and insecurities. It makes their music feel so much more real and relatable. Speaking of authenticity, we gotta talk about Doechii. Her debut mixtape, Alligator Bites Never Heal, is a wild ride full of energy, personality, and genre-bending experimentation.
Hold up a mixtape for a debut. That's pretty bold.
Right. But she pulls it off. She's even being compared to Erykah Badu for her rapping style.
Wow, that's high praise. I'm definitely going to have to check her out. What kind of sound are we talking here?
She blends hip-hop, R&B, and pop so effortlessly. It's familiar, but also completely unique. She's definitely one to watch.
Sounds like she's not afraid to take risks and push boundaries.
Yeah.
I'm adding her to my must-listen list right now. Shifting gears a bit, let's talk about Omar Apollo. His album, God Said No, got a lot of attention for its honest exploration of heartbreak and codependency.
Yeah, it's a really personal and introspective album. Apollo has said that he wrote most of it while he was in love, and it really captures those raw emotions, the highs and the lows of that experience.
So it's a classic heartbreak album.
It's more than that. He doesn't shy away from the messy parts of relationships either. He explores themes of dependence and how it can both strengthen and damage a connection.
That's deep. It sounds like he's not just writing songs about heartbreak, but about the complexities of human connection in general. And from what I've heard about Apollo's music, he's not afraid to experiment with sound either.
Absolutely. You can hear influences from legendary producers like Giorgio Moroder and Ryuichi Sakamoto in his music. It adds this really interesting layer of sonic depth. He's not afraid to blend genres and experiment with different sounds, but it always feels cohesive and intentional. Speaking of blend-in genres, let's talk about Khruangbin.
Ooh, Khruangbin. They've been on my radar for a while. I'm already getting some serious chill vibes just thinking about their music. What's their new album like?
Their album, A La Sala, is pure Khruangbin, smooth, psychedelic, and utterly transportive. They have this unique way of blending surf rock psychedelia and global influences to create a sound that's both relaxing and invigorating. And they're not afraid to let their music breathe, to create these extended instrumental passages that just wash over you.
It sounds like the perfect soundtrack for a long drive or a lazy Sunday afternoon. It's music that just takes you somewhere else.
Exactly. And that's what's so great about Khruangbin. They're masters of creating a mood, an atmosphere. Their music is like a sonic vacation. Speaking of sonic landscapes, let's talk about Jamie X.
Oh, Jamie X. I know him from the track 6. I love their music, so moody and atmospheric.
Right. But on his solo album, In Waves, Jamie X explores a different side of his musical personality. It's still got those atmospheric touches he's known for, but it's much more electronic and dance-oriented. I think pulsating beats, hypnotic melodies, and these really intricate sound textures.
So it's still Jamie X, but with a bit more of a party vibe.
Exactly. He's taken his signature sound and pushing it in new directions, creating something that's both familiar and excitingly fresh. What's really impressive is how he manages to balance his experimental tendencies with his pop sensibilities. The album is full of these really catchy hooks and melodies that get stuck in your head, but it's also got this really sophisticated and experimental edge to it.
It sounds like he's found that sweet spot between underground and mainstream, which is a really difficult thing to do. I'm definitely curious to hear how he pulls it off.
And speaking of artists who blur genre lines, let's talk about Tyler, the Creator.
Tyler, the Creator's album, Chromacopia, is like stepping into a kaleidoscope, sonic textures, and unexpected twists and turns everywhere you look.
Yeah.
One critic even described it as gloriously weird and often hilarious, which I think perfectly captures Tyler's artistic spirit.
Tyler, the Creator, is definitely one of a kind. He's always pushing boundaries and challenging expectations. I remember seeing him perform a few years ago, and he started his set dressed as a forest ranger. It was so unexpected, but also completely brilliant. That's Tyler for you. He's always keeping us on our toes. And that unpredictable energy is all over Chromacopia. It's this wild mix of genres and styles, from old school hip hop to psychedelic rock to experimental electronic music. And it's all held together by Tyler's unique vision and his undeniable charisma.
It sounds like he's not afraid to experiment and have fun with his music, which
Yeah.
is something I always appreciate. And you mentioned Chromacopia features Doechii, who we talked about earlier.
That's right. She's got a hilarious guest verse on one of the tracks.
Yeah.
It's great to see her getting recognition from someone like Tyler, the Creator. He has a knack for spotting talent and bringing together interesting collaborations.
It sounds like a total sonic adventure. So we've got experimental, pop, soulful, R&B, psychedelic vibes, and now a wild card with Tyler, the Creator. What else is in store for us?
Well, next we're going to dive into an album that takes us back to the roots of soul and R&B with Lucky Day.
Welcome back to our deep dive into 2024's best albums. We've covered a lot of ground already, from pop innovators to introspective singer-songwriters. And now get ready for a dose of raw emotion, sonic experimentation, and the enduring power of rock and roll.
Sounds good to me. Let's kick things off with Halsey's The Great Impersonator. This album is a deep dive into heartbreak and chronic illness, but it's also a testament to resilience.
Okay, so it's heavy stuff, but there's a message of hope in there too.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is that Halsey frames the whole album around the concept of channeling her musical heroines. She's using those influences to process her own experiences, to find strength and healing through music. And the music itself is incredible. It's classic Halsey with those powerful vocals and emotionally charged lyrics. But there's also a rawness and vulnerability that really sets this album apart.
It sounds like she's really pushing herself creatively and emotionally, which is what we've come to expect from Halsey. Speaking of powerful voices, let's talk about Gavin Turek. His album Diva of the People is a total throwback to the golden age of disco.
Oh yeah, Turek's got that disco energy down pat. But it's not just a rehash of old sounds. He captures the spirit of disco while bringing his own unique flair to the music. It's like Donna Summer meets Prince with a modern twist.
Now that's a combo I can get behind.
Yeah.
What's the overall vibe of the album?
It's all about liberation, self-expression, and just letting loose. You can't listen to this album without wanting to get up and dance.
It sounds like the perfect soundtrack for a night out, from disco vibes to something a little more intense. Let's talk about Idols. They're known for their explosive live performances and their genre-defying sound.
For sure. And their latest album, Tank, is no exception. It's a ferocious fusion of hardcore punk, experimental electronic music, and even some hip-hop influences. They've always been a band that pushes boundaries, but on Tank, they take it to a whole new level.
I saw Idols live a few years back, and it was one of the most intense concert experiences of my life. They have this raw energy that's just contagious.
Right. And that energy is all over Tank. It's an album that demands your attention. It's loud, it's confrontational, it's thought-provoking, but it's also incredibly cathartic. It's music that makes you feel alive.
It's a good reminder that rock and roll is far from dead. Speaking of artists who keep reinventing themselves, we have to talk about Billie Eilish.
Her new album, Hit Me Hard and Soft, is definitely a departure from her previous work. It's still very much Billie Eilish with those signature whispery vocals and dark atmospheric production. But it's also a lot more introspective and subdued.
So it's less about those big, bold statements and more about the quiet moments of reflection.
Exactly. There are still some upbeat tracks on the album, but the overall mood is more contemplative, more nuanced. It feels like she's exploring a different side of her artistry, and it's really captivating.
It sounds like an album that rewards close listening. You really have to pay attention to catch all the details and layers she's woven into the music.
Absolutely. Now for something completely different, let's talk about Sierra Farrell. She's a rising star in the world of Americana music.
Oh yeah, I've heard a lot of buzz about her lately. People are saying she's the next big thing in country and folk.
Her album Trail of Flowers is a beautiful blend of traditional country folk and bluegrass influences. She's got this incredible voice that's both powerful and delicate, and her songwriting is top-notch. It's an album that feels both timeless and fresh, like something you'd hear on a dusky back road in the Appalachians, but also something that's totally relevant to today's world.
It sounds like the perfect soundtrack for a road trip. I'm definitely adding her to my playlist.
Oh.
Okay, last but not least, we got to talk about Father John Misty.
Father John Misty always brings something unique to the table. His new album, Mahashmashana, is no exception. It's definitely not an easy listen. It's full of these really bleak observations about the human condition and the state of the world.
Yeah, Father John Misty can be pretty dark and cynical, but his music is also incredibly moving.
Exactly. And Mahashmashana is no different. It's full of those bleak observations, but it's also incredibly beautiful and musically rich. It's an album that stays with you long after you've finished listening to it.
It sounds like a powerful listening experience. Well, this deep dive has been an incredible journey through the diverse landscape of music in 2024. We've explored albums that challenge, inspire, and move us, from pop to hip-hop to rock to country and everything in between.
It's been amazing to see how music continues to connect us, make us feel less alone, and help us make sense of the world around us.
Absolutely. So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep discovering, and keep listening. There's a whole world of music out there waiting to be heard. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.